was about to eat all that. I've been working for government so long, I've had about 50 blocks.
Recording in progress.
Welcome everyone to the council business meeting. It is 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Today is August the 1st, 2023. We're in the council chambers on the 3rd floor of the county building. We welcome you and thank you for being here. We'll start with a pledge of allegiance. It will be led by our county manager, Andy Welch. Will you all please rise?
Please repeat the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Andy. As far as roll call, we have Tracy Shaw, our county clerk here, taking notes and recording. We have our assistant county manager, Brittany Lopez, county manager, Andy Welch. As far as the council, we have Councilman Wardle, Councilman Hamner, Councilman Stromberg, Councilman Thomas. We have Councilman Hoffman, who is excused tonight. From the county attorney's office, we have Colin Winchester. And we recognize that we have many out here from different auxiliaries and offices. Thank you for being here. First up is public comment. Is there anyone in the audience by a raise of hand that would like to make a public comment? Seeing none. Next is, let's see, presentation and information on the 2023 property tax assessment. Jake, it has down here Jake and Alison. You want the arrows to fly to both instead of just one, huh?
Do you, what, I wasn't given walk-up music. Do you want to do that again?
He's gonna have to think about that one.
Okay.
Don't do it, Jake.
I have an election next year, so. I'm glad I got a laugh, Brittany. Thank you for the opportunity to present a little bit of what happened with the assessments across the county this year. My name is Jake Parkinson, and I'm here representing my staff. We have 6 full-time appraisers and 4 contractors that help us accomplish the goal of valuing all 33,000 taxable parcels in our county every single year. I'm proud of the work they do, and I'm proud of the way they treat taxpayers, and just want to thank them for their professionalism and their patience with me. They're amazing. This first slide kind of just shows a snapshot of where we're at. This comes from the state's website that Alison and I get to spend a lot of time on, called CTR, which is a funny acronym in this state. But I think it's county tax rates. Yes, but certified tax rates. See, I don't even know. I have to ask Alison everything. But this shows where our value is at for 2023. So we have 3 buckets that include property tax in Utah. And one's real property, and that's the yellow. One's red, and that's centrally assessed, and green is personal property. So centrally assessed is done by the state level. I don't have anything to do with that, really. We value all real property, and then there's business personal property tax. But as you can see from the top of this list, we are now sitting at $9.2 billion. Let me put that in perspective. 5 years ago, Tooele County was at $3.9 billion in value. So that's how fast we've grown. And that's partially due to the market, and I'm proud to say that a big part of that is us doing a better job accurately capturing what's going on in the market, which is part of our job. A big component of that is new growth. So this year, we have $476 million in new growth. Last year, it was even more because our county was growing even faster. It was $551 million in new growth. And in 2019, it was $116 in new growth. So new growth is categorized as anything that's built that year. And it's important for taxes because that revenue from that property tax is actually icing on the cake for all the entities. So it's a big part of our job making sure we capture that new growth and accurately assess it. So let's go to the next slide. So how we measure our market for residential, and I'll also mix in with commercial, is last year we had 1,600 residential cells from 2022 to analyze, and we had about 40 commercial cells over the course of the last 3 years that we analyzed for our commercial valuations. We have defined Tooele County into 12 different market areas, and there are over 30 different unique neighborhoods within those 12 market areas. And what we do is we take those cells, analyze them quarter by quarter. Last year was very unique. It's the first time in my experience in real estate in coming up close to 20 years in real estate valuations as an appraiser. But we had the first 2 quarters of the year, we went up drastically. First quarter was like 26%, second quarter was 19%, and then what happened to the market? It started coming down. So it was the first year we actually had to make adjustments for a cell that sold in January. We had to go up the first 2 quarters and then down 2 quarters to get to our January 1st, 2023 valuation. And so it's kind of interesting how we come up with those values. It's a year-long process. We just finished today analyzing where we're at with the first quarter sales from this year. So that was our report today in our office. So it's a year-long process. It's not something that's just done right before we close the tax roll, but we're already well on our way next year. This graph is really illustrative of the problem that you guys heard a lot about last year, residential property owners complaining that the tax burden, their taxes are going up drastically. And that was because as the piece of the pie for residential property owners got bigger, their portion of the tax becomes bigger. So there were people last year at Truth and Taxation in Tooele City that would say, you say the increase is only $112 per household. Well, my taxes for Tooele City are going up $300 per household, so you're lying. Well, the truth is Tooele City wasn't lying. What happened was it wasn't just, they increased over the previous year value, and they increased more than other types of property, and so their tax burden went up greater than the average. And it's a really difficult concept to grasp, but this graph kind of illustrates it, and I don't know what you can see in the colors, but the orange line represents residential assessed values. This is 3 specific properties in our county. The assessed values over since 2014. So you'll see that top line that's orangish, it goes up drastically and then kind of levels out this last year, maybe came down a little bit. The next is the next is a commercial property, the yellow line. You can see commercial property kind of stayed the same. It's almost hidden by the vacant land values, and then went up, has just gone up in the last 3 years. And then you'll see the vacant land parcel went up drastically and is now coming back down. But that's their proportion of tax change is the next graph, and you'll see it doesn't mirror exactly because it's all part of that mill levy system. It actually follows a little bit, but the amount of taxes is all in proportion to what the other values are in the county. So it's a complicated process. I'll be presenting next week at the interim day at the legislature. You can go to the next slide. And we presented last year too, me and John Uleberry, the Weber County Assessor, and what they want to know about is why this residential portion has grown. And this is a statewide table, and you'll see over the years, the yellow's residential, the percentage, the value that it's gone up proportionately, where the green, which is centrally assessed, is basically the same size ribbon over the years. Personal property, similar size ribbon, but the big portion that's taking the burden of the growth is residential. And so they're looking at a few legislative options to see if they want to stabilize that and mess with the system or not. So we don't know what the plan is, but I would like to encourage, this year the biggest increase in the county was to commercial property owners. And so trying to get the word out there to them. The process to appeal is very easy, and Alison's in charge of that appeals process, and maybe she'll talk a little bit about that.
So council, most of the time I come before you for budget and money financial matters, but the auditor's office also has a very unique role in the tax roll and assessment process. We actually act as the clerk for the Board of Equalization, and so our office acts as a neutral party for citizens who want to appeal the value of their property. They come to our office and submit the appeals for their property so that they have a neutral place to stop. We take all their information, and then through our office, we submit those appeals to the assessor's office. The citizens have 3 opportunities to have their appeals heard. First of all, they can work with Jake's office and stipulate on a value that the assessor's office and the citizen both agree on. If they don't feel like they agree with that stipulation value, they can go to a hearing officer and have the hearing officer that's also a licensed appraiser hear the scenario or the situation, and if they still don't like that decision, they can appeal to the state. One thing that I think is really pretty interesting about this process is a lot of times, I would say probably, wouldn't you say almost 95% of the time, Jake's office is able to stipulate with our citizens and our taxpayers. And that's not because he gets it wrong. That's because when he goes out to assess, he only gets to see the outside of the property. And so a lot of times there's information that we're not savvy to. Maybe you finished a basement, or maybe you haven't finished a basement. And so we encourage taxpayers to appeal their values if there's something not right, because we don't have all the information. And so when you appeal a value, it just helps us be better at what we do. And so we always kind of get the question about how big of a value difference should I appeal? We always say that there's no value difference too big or too small. So stop in our office. We have 3 ways that you can appeal. You can either appeal in person, by mail, or online. Our online option, we're pretty proud of this. Jake was one of the first assessors in the state to be able to accept online appeals. And so he's very, very progressive in the way that he works and the way that he accepts those appeals. And so we just want citizens to know that we take their appeals very seriously. It's not an adversarial process. It's something that we want to learn from and something that we want to help them with. So,
Thank you. And I know we set a time for you to come talk to the businesses about it, so thank you for doing that. Any other questions, council?
I think last year as you guys started this discussion, I think this is incredible. I was with Tooele City for 17 years, and I think the last year or 2 we had a discussion like this. But it's very helpful for the citizens in the way that you've broken that down, so thank you very much.
It's a forward way of thinking, and appreciate you doing that, to help them go through that and to educate them, really. Okay, that'll bring us down to our minutes. We have June 20, 2023, work and business meeting minutes. Is there any corrections, additions, council? If not, chair, entertain a motion.
Make the motion that we approve our meeting minutes from our June 20th business and work meetings.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Stromberg to approve the minutes from June 20th, 2023, both meetings. Is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second from Councilman Thomas. Any further discussions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those that may oppose say nay. Sounds unanimous. Let's bring us down to the consent agenda and the check registry. Check registry will go from July 20th, run through to July 20th, and that is on our website. We will look for a chair to entertain a motion for the check registry.
I make a motion we adopt the check registry.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Wardle, is there a second?
Second.
Here's a second from Councilman Stromberg. Any further discussions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those that may oppose say nay. Sounds unanimous. That will bring us down to the consent agenda. Contracts, contract roads improvement project. This is something that Department Head Jed Bell talked about. Is there any other comments, Andy, that you want to make on this? Council, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then Chair to entertain a motion.
I make a motion we adopt, are we taking the contract? Oh, yeah. Make a motion that we adopt consent agenda item 8A on the contract for tenant improvement project.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Wardle, is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second from Councilman Stromberg. Any further discussions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those who may oppose say nay.
Mr. Chairman,
Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas
I'm going to vote to abstain.
with one abstaining. Thank you, sir. That does bring us down to, excuse me, Tooele County, oh, yeah, sorry. Memorandum between Tooele County and Tooele City on Settlement Canyon for a trail that Corey presented to us. Is there any further discussions or comments on that? Seeing none, then.
Exciting to have trails
Yeah,
being developed.
more trails, yeah, that people can be on. And I'm sure it comes with signage
We're working on the signage, correct?
on the maps. Thank you. I forgot to ask him that, actually. So, and when we redo our maps, we're going to have that on there?
Correct.
Okay. Chair to entertain a motion.
Make the motion that we approve the MOA for the trails as presented.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Stromberg, is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second from Councilman Thomas. Any further discussions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those that may oppose say nay. Sounds unanimous. Now, let's bring us down to legal defender agreement with Curt Morris. And Colin Winchester has commented on that. Is there any other comments that you wanted to make, Colin?
Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any other questions? And Chair to entertain a motion.
Make a motion we adopt the legal defender agreement.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Wardle, is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second from Councilman Stromberg. Any further discussions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those who may oppose say nay. Sounds unanimous to me. That will bring us down to line item transfers. And this is something that our auditor, Alison McCoy, spoke about in our work meeting. And Alison, I'm going to repeat it, and you just shake your head if I'm right or wrong. Emergency services, moving $75,000 from the state vehicle to the state, I can't read that.
Interagency.
Thank you. I'll put on my glasses. Community development, moving $378. And then another community development capital fund, that's $100,000. Okay. Any further discussions or comments or questions? Council? And Chair to entertain a motion.
Make the motion that we approve the line item transfers as presented.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Stromberg, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Hearing a second from Councilman Wardle. Any further discussions or comments? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those may oppose say nay. Sounds unanimous. That will come down to amending, increasing the 2023 budget. Alison has spoken about that. Is there any other questions before we open up for public hearing? Do we want to get out? Okay, then Chair to entertain a motion to open up public hearing.
So moved.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Stromberg, is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second from Councilman Thomas. All those in favor of opening up public hearing, say aye. Aye. All those may oppose, say nay. Public hearing is now open. Is there anyone in the audience by a raise of hand that would like to speak to increasing the 2023 budget that is in the program for the general fund, public health, and airport fund? Seeing none, Chair to entertain a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Wardle, is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second from Councilman Stromberg. All those in favor of closing public hearing on Resolution 23, say aye. Aye. All those that may oppose, say nay. Public hearing is now closed. Chair to entertain a motion on amending and increasing the 2023 budget for the general fund of $40,000, a little over $40,000, for public health fund, $27,000, and airport fund, $13,000. Still looking for a motion.
I'll make the motion that we approve Resolution 23, amending the 2023 budget as presented.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Stromberg, is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second from Councilman Wardle. Any further discussions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those that may oppose say nay. Hearing none. That'll bring us down to sales tax revenue bond. That will bring up Andy Welch. Would you please present to us or introduce?
We will tag team on this one, so yes, I'll introduce this. So as I mentioned in the earlier meeting, Tooele County is the fastest growing county in this state, and so keeping up with the service demands is a challenge. And so one of the things that we looked at was looking at Desert Peak, which has been a gem for the county, but had been neglected and run down. And so we had a consultant, the name of the company was Think. They did an assessment and a study of this last year. They provided a final report in December of last year, and they had a number of projects that we could undertake at Desert Peak to really meet the service demands that are required by the citizens. And so we had a lot of public input, and they provided us a comprehensive report of the improvements that we needed to make there. Some of the improvements we'll take care of in an annual budget process. There's smaller items that we can work in annually. But there are some other larger projects that we couldn't afford to do that with the annual budget process. And so we're using some of the funding that we receive from the feds during COVID. There's some ARPA money that we kind of set aside that we've known that we would wanted to use to make a significant long-term improvement in the community. And so we're looking at using some of that funding and then using some bond proceeds as well to help fund the rest of this project. And so Councilman Ward will go into a little bit further on some of this, and then we have Bond Council and Zions Bank is here as well. They'll answer any questions that you might have regarding the sales tax revenue bonds.
Thank you, Andy and Chairman. So after we received the plan, we were tasked with coming up with options on either how to fund the plan or implement Phase 2. We implemented Phase 1 during the budget last year. Phase 2, as you'll recall, just about a month ago, we brought that to the council with 5 different options. As we explained in the last meeting, we centered on option, I believe, number 4, which was $15 million in cash and $15 million in bonding to complete Phase 2. In the meantime, we were made aware that there were, as we've been working to stabilize the pool, which had been sinking, we were made aware of potential, we were made aware it may not work, and that we would have to start testing to see if the subsoils were compromised or if there were other issues. So in the discussions over the course of the last month, what we determined is to, instead of bonding for $15 million, which was a hard number, to change the wording up to $30 million in case we have to replace the pool. That allows, and this does not mean that this is the decision of the council, that if all things were implemented, it could be covered with the monies. What that will also mean is that we will have to come back and have a conversation about what we do depending on where the pool will be and where we are at. But it allows us to bond and not have to come back for a second bond. Let's say that it's $5 million or $3 million or dip into some of those reserves that we've tried to keep. That would put us in a position and save us costs on issuing bonds. These bonds are sales tax guaranteed bonds. They're not general obligation bonds or a different kind of bond. And so with that, the up to $30 million does not mean that we'll spend $30 million. It means that we have the ability to be flexible based upon what we understand with the study of the pool coming back to us. With that, I'll turn the time to Mike Jensen to introduce those from Zions Bank and our bond counsel.
Mike?
Good evening, council. Thank you for the time. I'd like to introduce some guests we have with us tonight from Zions Bank Public Finance, who works as our financial advisors. We have Cara, Bertot, and Japheth McGee. And from Gilmore and Bell, who will be the bond counsel, we have Shanelle Salcido. So they're here to answer any questions that you might have concerning this bond issue and where we go from here. So council, they are at your disposal to answer questions.
Council, any questions or comments? I know we have a few.
So, one question, and Councilman Wardle, I appreciate you kind of explaining this, but I guess as we look at the option of the whole 30 million as we are now versus going back to the 15 and figuring out what happens with the pool and coming back in a year, 18 months, help me understand why we want to go ahead and do this up to 30 versus doing a second one later.
Yeah, it just allows you some flexibility so that you can move on things as you see fit. Like I said, it's not like Councilman Wardle said, it doesn't require you to, and in fact, there's specific language in this resolution that says that you're not required to issue the full $30 million. But it just allows you flexibility. Sometimes there can be changes in the market that you might want to take advantage of that happen quickly. And so the flexibility to move quickly on projects can be beneficial. Yeah.
Okay. So, that's the thing. I mean, so as we find out what's happening, we have the funds available, we can do it as opposed to go through months process.
Yeah. Basically, you have, for issuing municipal bonds, you have at best a 45-day period that you have to wait. That is 15 days or 14 days for a public hearing for noticing, and then a hearing for the public, and then a 30-day contest period where residents can come in and say that, hey, we want to take this to a vote of the public. So between a combination of those two things, the fastest you can move, and this is lightning speed, is 45 days on any kind of municipal financing. And where, if you really want to get into the market and where you see an advantageous time, 45 days is not, that's a long runway. So that's why the advantage to doing, a broader parameter is that you can move more quickly if and when you decide that a project needs to be a certain size, 15 million, 30 million, you can do anywhere in that range.
Just one question is, for the public, who buys the bonds? And who do they go out to and who you're trying to sell them to?
Not Zions. So that's the first thing that people are always wondering about. Is Zions here to buy the bonds? No, Zions is your fiduciary. So we have a legal fiduciary to you. We are a municipal advisor. And back after the Great Recession, they made some changes to federal statute that basically said, we as your advisor cannot purchase bonds. So Zions then goes out, helps you in a number of ways. The plan now is to do a negotiated bond sale, which means that you will find an underwriter, a large firm, say Wells Fargo or Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, Bank of America. Any of these large firms could come in and win the opportunity to go out and then market them to individual investors. Now, that can wind up being, individual retail investors. You could go in and buy a $5,000 block of bonds. Who it'll mostly be is large investment funds, BlackRocks, Vanguards, insurance pools. They'll come in and buy blocks of them to hold. And we did a bond sale for, I did one for Dixie State, Utah Tech, a couple of years ago. And Fidelity came in and bought the whole block of bonds just themselves and underwrote them themselves to put into their portfolio. So sometimes those are the kinds of people who will come in and buy them. So it's not just one group of people in the anticipated transaction. You're looking at multiple large investors into it.
Then my last question is, buying bonds, I recognize that this is an investment, as you stated. Is there any penalty if paid off early?
So as a market underwriting, typically what the market expects is a 10-year prepayment lockout period. You can have some flexibility. You can determine if maybe you want to go 7 years, but the market standard is 10 years. If you go shorter than that, you can do that. It might become harder to sell. Typically, you'll take a penalty on that in the form of, if you're issuing a premium bond, meaning that investors pay you more than you pay them back eventually on the bond, the premium will shrink. So there are a bunch of different things that'll happen, but there is a 10-year prepayment lockout typically with market underwriting bonds. There is an option to go out and do a direct purchase bond and find a single investor to purchase your bonds. So in the state of Utah, that looks like Zions Bank, except for in this case because we couldn't. Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of Utah does a lot of purchasing, some other regional banks like Webster Bank, and they actually provide more flexible prepayment provisions where you can prepay. Bank of Utah usually do prepayable anytime with no penalty. Webster Bank, JP Morgan will do 3-year, 7-year prepayment lockout periods, call periods. So it kind of just depends on how you issue bonds. If you want that flexibility to refinance or maybe restructure bonds, or maybe you think you're gonna have cash available in, X number of years to pay down debt, then those prepayable direct purchase bonds can be valuable.
Okay. Chair recognizes Councilman Wardle.
So, and I'm going to build off of a question that Eric said, and I brought this up.
Yeah.
So could you explain for the public what the cost savings between issuing one bond versus two bonds? And I know we've talked about flexibility, but what does the cost savings look like over time?
It depends. I mean, there are different things that you have to do with each municipal bond. So you have all these costs of issuance that come out of it. So say you go into the market and it's a volatile time and investors say, hey, we want bond insurance on there. That's something that is going to be an additional cost on there. Probably not the case with your rating, but going out and getting a rating, that's a cost. And for your bonds, if you split that up into two, it becomes less efficient. It's not huge difference on the cost of issuance, but it is a lot of staff time. I mean, you have to do a new official statement, a new offering document to investors that is, Cara can attest, lengthy, and it takes a lot of time to put together. It also costs money to put that together. All the different services that you have, bond counsel services, fees for advisors, underwriters, discounts, all of those things change. And oftentimes with smaller bonds, you pay a higher percentage of your transaction in these costs because the professionals, underwriters are going to want to make more money. They're going to want to, make a base amount, a base spread on that. If they have a larger transaction, maybe they say, we're not going to charge you $5 a bond, per $1,000 of proceeds to sell your bonds. We'll charge you $2, $3 a bond to sell your bonds to investors.
So you mentioned bond rating, and Alison, we've talked about this. Would you explain to the public what our bond rating is and how that might compare to a credit score, which would be likened to?
Yeah, so because you don't have any sales tax bonds outstanding right now, you don't have a sales tax rating. But what you'll do is you'll go out to the rating agencies, and most likely most entities use S&P Global for sales tax bonds. They kind of have a more favorable methodology for that. I built a model that kind of says, hey, this is what we would expect if you have X, Y, and Z. But the credit rating that we would expect the county to get is probably AA on the bonds. So a lot of things go into that. They look at the size of the community. They look at your participation in a large metro area. They look at the coverage that you have. So how much the revenues you're pledging, in this case sales taxes, cover your debt service every year. Right now you have about $9 million in pledged revenues to the, 2.5 million if you go the full 30 $30 million, that basically gives you 3.75 times coverage. That's a really good coverage ratio, and so that goes into getting this credit rating. And this, equates to, your credit score as an individual person. You get your FICO, you get an 800, you're looking good, right? And if you're a municipal entity, getting a AA is a really strong credit. Most people look at that, most investors look at that and say, there's not much better in the world, maybe besides a U.S. Treasury or a state of Utah general obligation bond, which is the best thing you can buy out there.
Thank you. And then if I can just clear two things that we haven't included in both the discussions. In the 1515, we talked about the debt service and how we would pay it and how we've worked to get to that point. Anything above the 15 million, we will have to go back and retool the financial model. And that's why we're looking at this in a separate light. That doesn't mean that we're going to go do that yet. It means that we have the flexibility to do that. Would you just finish it? And why would we want to bond versus pay as you go?
Yeah. So right now, there's a real advantage to bonding. So if you look at it from this perspective of the inflation cost versus the cost of interest, inflation costs in the state of Utah on construction inflation have been 10% for the last 3-4 years at least. And so if you are paying 10% inflation, a project that costs $30 million right now in 5 years will cost a lot more than that. And you actually would pay more for that project in 5 years than even borrowing right now at 4% would cost you over the life of a 20-year bond. So that's the advantage. Obviously, that makes some assumptions about where inflation will be long-term, but that is the disadvantage right now in a high inflation environment to pay-go. If you have cash right now, your answer is almost always going to be pay for cash. Washington County built a new administration building where their advisors and, I was in a meeting where they said, we're sorry we didn't bond. And John Bronson, who you guys may know because he used to be the advisor for Tooele County, John Bronson in that meeting said, why would you say sorry to me? We're your fiduciary. We want you to do what's in your best interest, which is paying cash and not paying interest if you've got the cash. But even right now, your cash is really valuable. You're earning 5% plus in the PTIF, and you're only going to pay 4% on a bond. So there's an advantage there to keeping your cash in and earning a lot of money. That line item in your budget is going to be a lot better this year than it was the last 4 or 5 years or longer than that. I mean, PTIF is higher right now than it's been since 2001.
Fantastic. Thank you. Those were my questions.
So if I just want to clarify something in that example, Brian. The cash would be truly if we had the cash for the whole thing, like if we were sitting on 45 million cash, we could just do that. That's not taking, that's more the example you're saying. So we were really just going cash. It's not taking the cash we have and using it first, because that goes back to your interest. We're making more on the interest and holding that.
Yeah, and it's all scale, right? So I mean, if you're going to contribute in a project, you're going to contribute 10 million. You already have that 10 million, but you need to do another 20, 30 million dollars for it. You're not comparing the 10 million that you're already going to pay. You're talking about future that you're going to save up versus, the interest cost that you'd pay on a bond.
Okay, no, thanks.
Chair recognizes Colin Winchester.
I have a question for bond counsel. The resolution, the parameters resolution that you prepared and sent to us indicates that the public hearing will be held on the 29th. We meet on the 15th. Is there a reason you selected the 29th as opposed to the 15th?
There is a 14-day.
Will you turn the green light on?
There's a 14-day notice period that needs to be met, and assuming that we'd be noticing tomorrow, then that pushes us out over to the next meeting on the 20th. So are you also meeting on the 29th?
Yes.
As well? Okay,
15th
so
and the 29th.
Yeah, so that requires us to push it out one more meeting to meet that 14-day notice period.
Thank you.
Yep. And that's all in that 14-day notice, then 30-day contest period comment that I made earlier to Chair Hamner.
So does the 30 days begin at the end of the 14 days, or does the 30 days begin on the 29th?
The 30 days begins as soon as you publish notice. So there are two things. You publish notice of a public hearing, but you also publish notice of bonds to be issued. And then the 30-day contest period begins when you issue the public notice or the notice of bonds to be issued.
And we would do that notice after the meeting on the 29th or tomorrow?
Do it tomorrow.
Okay.
Yep, and that gives you that means that now you can do anytime after the 30 days from tomorrow ends, you could issue
So
bonds.
the 14, 30 days run parallel.
So just if I can summarize something then, going back, and you sparked a couple of thoughts now. Doing a project with cash and bonding is the optimal if you don't have all cash.
Man, grant funding is great if you can get it. That's where the real money's at, right?
We
You want your
understand
ARPA
that,
funds.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there are, we talk about it, and when we look at municipal projects, we look at an all of the above approach, where can you get funding from? And so, grant funding is always in the mix if you can get it. But right now, bonding is not a bad option. So one thing that I won't go into the weeds, esoteric, but yeah, your bonding is not as bad a prospect right now, even though rates are high, because your reinvestment is so high. And honestly, even though rates are high right now, if you have that prepayment flexibility, or you expect, reinvestment rates to remain at a certain level for a while, then you're not gonna be inverted, have negative arbitrage on that. And by the time you get to 7-10 years out, you're gonna refinance those probably, because what you'll do is you'll come down the yield curve on the bonds, and you'll be able to refinance those. What was a 10-year bond that had a 10-year rate on it will now be a 1-year bond with a 1-year rate, and so you'll save money then. So it's not necessarily all bad to issue using bonds right now. Obviously, that's not everything that goes into the calculation here, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying, yeah, just bond for everything now.
But what I'm asking is that because of market conditions, when we see the inflation rates go, bond rates tend to go, because you make money off bonds in that case.
Yeah.
But if we continue to see inflation not get under control in not only our nation, but within the world, then bonding can become even more expensive as we look down the road, which really ties up the time value of money.
Yeah.
So it's one of those variables.
Yeah, so one thing that's happening with municipal bonds right now is if you look at the yield curve, so we talk about the yield curve is how much you pay for a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, and typically what you would expect to see is that a 1-year municipal bond would, be like 25 basis points. Then a 2-year, 50, 3-year, 75. And then as you get out to like 20 years, it kind of levels off, but you get this, an upward sloping yield curve. Right now, what we have is your 1 year's at like 5.25, but then your 2 years at 5%, and then your 3-year, and then as you get to about 10, it levels off for a while, and then as you get to 10, it starts to go back up. So we have an inverted yield curve. That is an expectation that inflation will drop in the next 4 or 5 years, and rates will return to a more normal system. If inflation is persistent, though, you would start to see those rates that are right now inverted start to tick up above the 1- and 2-year rates, and so you could potentially start to see overall rates rising from where they are right now to levels you'd last saw more in the early 2000s.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
So do we have to?
Andy, I'm
Do
sorry.
we adopt this resolution then tonight, or are we just placing it on?
Yes.
Andy, any other comments?
The only comment I'll make is you mentioned grants are a good way to start, and so we did receive a $750,000 grant to do some work out there, so we've started.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So I have the yield curve right there. You can see, so that's what it normally looks like, upward sloping. That's what it looks like right now. Really kind of dumb looking.
Okay.
Thank you for coming. Council, Chair to entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we adopt resolution oh, wait, no. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we amend resolution 24 and adopt the attachment that was given to us that changed page 2's numbers from 24 to 3.7%, or 3.7. And with that, if there's no objection, then we'll carry that on. So I make a motion, we amend the resolution, adopting the new paperwork for resolution 24.
So I'm clear, we're going to take off existing Exhibit D and insert this new Exhibit D, is that right?
Correct. Thank you for clarifying the clarification.
Hearing a motion, Councilman Wardle. Is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second from Councilman Stromberg. Is there any further discussions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those that may oppose, say nay.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we adopt the amended resolution 24.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Wardle. Is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second from Councilman Thomas. Any further discussions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those may oppose, say nay. That was unanimous. That will bring us down to amending the powers and duties of the county administration hearing officers. Is there, and that's Colin Winchester as he presented in the work. Is there any further discussions or questions? No? Then Chair to entertain a motion.
Make the motion that we adopt ordinance 15.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Stromberg, is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second from Councilman Thomas. Any further discussions or comments on? Seeing and hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those may oppose say nay. Ayes have it. Repealing Title IV, Chapter 19, Accident Review Board, as presented from Colin Winchester. Any other questions or comments? This is one that's redundant.
Make a motion that we repeal Title IV, Chapter 19.
Hearing a motion from Councilman Wardle, is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second from Councilman Stromberg. Any further discussions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those that may oppose say nay. Okay, that will come down to action items. Council updates. Councilman Wardle.
Yeah, I received one today. We were at the NACO National Convention last week, and I sit on the Community Economic Workforce Development Board. And right at the end of our day of meetings, a comment came up, and this was adopted as part of the NACO platform for this year, is that there is a proposal going into the Farm Bill, and you're going to wonder why these two are related. And I don't know why, but a proposal into the Farm Bill to increase the size of semi-trucks and the weights that they're allowed to carry. This would be, as it was explained to us, very, very damaging, not only to our roads and our bridges. And so NACO and the said board were waiting for a letter to be issued to us. We received the letter this afternoon from Jessica Jennings, who is our NACO director over this area. They're asking that if we could sign a letter indicating to our legislative representatives in Washington, D.C., that we are opposed to this, and we ask that they oppose this part of the Farm Bill so that two things can take place. Number one, it creates a nexus when it comes to electric vehicles, that when you start pulling more weight, you're using more electricity, and the grid is simply not there to do this, which will increase the cost of shipping. It will bottleneck our supply chains, is one of the concerns. The second one is that once we start talking about bridges, when we look at exit 99, we look at the Grantsville exit, Mid-Valley Highway, If those bridges have not been built and rated to the extra load of vehicles, we will have to go back in the legislature and looking at the legislative, what happened in our legislature this last year where they are retiring the bonds so that we can just pay as you go. On many of these issues, this will completely upend the economic trajectory for how we've been doing funding with UDOT and what we just put in place. Most of our bridges would have to be replaced, and in our recent discussions with UDOT, this does start to create a problem because, one, we don't have enough construction companies that will have to go in and look and service all of these. I-15 will be going under construction in the next 2 years, which will create a problem in the ability, increase costs for any road construction. Then what we look at on SR 36, what we look at on Main Street in Tooele, what we look at in Grantsville City on Main Street, all of those roads that have been rebuilt in the last 10 years may not be able to handle those weights and will have to be rebuilt again. So I'm looking to the council for support so we can have Andy get that letter back to our legislative counterparts and NACO representatives. I'm just looking for opinions, not votes. Am I saying that right? So Kendall, would you be okay if we signed?
Yep.
Do you have an opinion on that? Jared, do you have an opinion on whether or not we should sign? Okay. So we'll start moving on that. We did finish NACO meetings last week. And it was a pretty interesting conference in the SED committee. I did find it ironic that our counterparts on the eastern border, eastern part of the United States and western part of the United States were the ones that were held up as the shining star on dealing with homelessness, especially those in Los Angeles County. That the policies that they're looking at adopting were literally the examples. So what I would suggest is we talk to our people here is, let's just do the opposite. Just the opposite. Whatever that was, let it be the opposite. So, okay, and I learned a new word. I'm not supposed to use homelessness. It's houseless individuals. So that's the new phrase I was told. So that's my report.
You were told from where? Oh, from Los Angeles.
The people in Portland, actually. So that came from a commissioner in Portland, so who sits on that committee.
Thank you, Councilman Wardle. Councilman Strongberg?
Yeah, I'll just want to pass on my appreciation and things is going to Country Fan Fest this weekend. It is a big undertaking, so to Scott and Andy and Brittany for all the work you guys did for the contract, putting that on, Corey and his staff dealing with that, the sheriff and your staff. I'm sure it's not easy. Had a couple conversations with them, and I mean that's a lot to deal with. So overall, I think it's a great event, but I do recognize the undertaking that our county staff is putting in that. So I really do want to pass on my appreciation and tell them thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Strongberg. Councilman Thomas?
Yeah, likewise about Fan Fest, I was able to go with a friend, Justin Wingfield and his mom, and we had a great time, and they were so accommodating to Justin with his wheelchair. It was just a great event, and they really enjoyed that. As everybody I talked to, it was a good time, a lot of fun. Also, I'd like to recognize Mark McKendrick. He used to be the manager over Deseret Peak, and he did that in a hell of a time, trying to keep that going. When the budget cuts happened and restrictions in funds, and yet Mark and Misty and his staff kept the wheels going and moving forward, and so now it's time to take that next step. So I appreciate all the work that's been done, that to Corey and to the team, by all means. And so just good things happening in the county, so that's what.
Well said.
Thank you, Councilman Thomas. Andy? Andrew?
Just thank you for your support. We do have a lot going on right now. One other thing I'd just like to mention, if you haven't seen it yet, I think, Brittany, you sent out an email about the Ochre Mountain survey that's out. So if you do get that, please respond to that. We'll have that for a couple of weeks, is that correct? correct? End of August, okay. So make sure you respond to that. That's all I have.
In there, it says respond to you or just
No, it's a
respond on
survey.
the app?
Yeah, there's a that's a QR code that you can download, and it's a Google survey you can respond to.
Wonderful.
We have a consultant that's working on a plan, and so this is part of that plan, is getting public input.
Wonderful. Thank you. That will bring us down to Chair to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Hearing a motion to adjourn, is there a second? Second. All those in favor, say aye. 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 All those may oppose, say nay. Don't say anything.